Welcome to Arlington Archives, the podcast that dives deep into the stories that shape the American Dream City. As Arlington celebrates 150 years of history and progress, we're bringing you the voices and legacies that make this city a cornerstone of Texas and a proud part of America's story. I'm your host, O.K. Carter, and this esteemed scholar is today's co-host, UTA Special Collections Processing Archivist, Erica Rousseau. Hey, Erica, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Stick around through all the podcasts about Arlington, and you'll become an expert on this city's colorful history. Our topic today is a bit of Arlington's past that only really old-timers, or maybe archivists, know about. For just a brief, shining, and very noisy years, Arlington was a southwest hub for open-wheel auto racing. Ready to go, Erica?
Let's do it.
We'll get to that auto racing business in a second, but first, let's have just a brief overview of special collections at UTA, which is one of my favorite places, and by the way, which I've sent many, many people to over the years.
Thank you so much. So at UT Arlington Special Collections, we are the University Archives. So we house the entire history of the university there, and we also hold collections that have to deal with Texas history. So pre-Texas, early Texas, Texas regional history, U.S.-Mexico War history. We're the home of the Texas political history collection, the Texas labor collection. We're the largest archive of Texas labor history in the state. We also house Texas disability history. And so all an archive is, for those who don't know, is we are a repository. We're a place that hold old documents so that they can be researched and accessed by the public.
Okay. I have a little bit of background. Part of this is that the Star-Telegram, Forward Star-Telegram, from about 1902 to 1992 kept what they called a morgue of all of their clips, all of their photos, and when they went digital back in 1992, who ended up with all that stuff?
That is us.
That's
we
you.
are the official now photo morgue of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram collection.
I've got that. It's interesting because I like I say, I've seen a lot of people up there, but I had a guy the other day says, "Well, hey, maybe they'll digitalize that soon." And I was like, I don't think so, because I think there are millions, and it turns out 3 million, right?
3 million, yes, sir.
Okay, let's get around to it now. You are a collection archivist?
So my official title is processing archivist,
Okay.
but I'll take whatever you want to call me.
That is a mouthful. So you're searching for stuff all the time. So eventually you came upon what we're going to talk about today, which is that racing history.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I am a lifelong race fan. I grew up watching racing with my dad, and now my husband is really into racing. He's a mechanic, so I'm just constantly surrounded by cars. And I knew that the Arlington Grand Prix was coming up, and I thought there has to be some race history here, like somewhere. So I just started digging, and I found a few mentions of auto racing at Arlington Downs, the horse track that we used to have here, but nothing really dug into it. So I spent some time, and myself and a colleague kind of just dug into the Fort Worth Star-Telegram collection, because our best guess was that if there was something that big going on, the Star-Telegram was going to send a reporter out, and thankfully we were right, and we found some great negatives that had never been printed before, either in the Star-Telegram or anywhere, and got to dig into that history. So it's kind of cool.
This is pretty useful at the moment, because right before, we're taping this just a few days before the Java House Grand Prix of Arlington, which I think was March 13th or 15th. So you put together an exhibition about this era, which is open wheel racing, which was popular in the late 1940s and 50s. In fact, Indy racing is open wheel now. But your exhibition that you put together is called Uncovered Speed, the Legacy of Open Wheel Racing in Arlington. When was this?
So the Arlington era of open wheel racing was specifically from 1947 to 1950. So there was just 3 years, 3 short years, but there were 5 races held during that time span of open wheel racing. And an open wheel race car is just a car that doesn't have the wheels underneath the chassis like in a wheel will. So think of a modern Indy car or a Formula One car or things like that.
But they used to call them midget racers too.
Yep, there were midget racers and something called a big car.
A sprint car.
Which is what they would have called a big car back then.
We have now extinguished my total knowledge about open wheel racing, so I hope you know what what I can add to this is that during World War II there were tens and thousands of young men who went to war, and they were acquainted with a couple of things. One was the state-of-art mechanical technology of the time. You've got aircraft and planes and vehicles and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of them have never had this exposure. So the U.S. emerges out of World War II with sort of a renewed appetite, really, for speed, spectacle, technology, and all this stuff that they can use, these military skills that they've used. And that's kind of how, open wheel racing is all about that, is it not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is. There's some of the fastest cars out there, and so it is all about speed and adrenaline and excitement.
Okay, I'm going to back up just a second because we had a guy, very wealthy man here named W.T. Wagner.
Yes, sir.
And in 1929, he built a horse racing track, thoroughbred racing track, which was terribly successful economically and in terms of audiences and crowds that it attracted. And so, unfortunately, this was during the Depression, and also we're kind of in the Bible Belt. There was a lot of hostility to the track and the racing. So the track basically was open just for a few years with legal pari-mutuel betting. And then the legislature, though, shut it down in 1937. So there's the question of what you're going to do with the track. And they used it for carnivals. They used it for all kinds of different racing. They used it for special events. But eventually, you get around to what you've found, this open car racing. So fans were flocking to tracks all over. Indianapolis 500 is a good way to talk about it. So you went through all these archives, and tell me what you found.
So at first, the first thing we found were just the photographs. But I wanted to know, a picture can only tell us so much. I wanted to know a little more. So I got to digging online, and I found some great forums for people that gave information of race results and things like that. And we also had already in the collection some great maps, some overview maps of Arlington Downs. And then I kind of started digging outside of our collection to try to grow it a little bit because there was so little racing history that we already held in the collection. And so I went and sourced a couple of race programs from a 1947 and 1948 race at Arlington Downs that are really, really neat if you get a chance to come to UTA to come view them. And the exhibit is open for anybody to view, but they have like the spectators' notes, and you could see where they were keeping times in them and keeping track of each racer and who didn't finish. And so not only does it have great racing history, it has that fun like spectator aspect to it too.
Yeah, as these veterans return, they had a taste. You've been to war, you have a taste for adrenaline now. And also, as these races became more popular, media coverage of them began to expand. This particularly, you're beginning to see newsreels really expound. You're beginning to see, this is a little too early for television, but we're about to enter that era. But all these media things introduced racing to a wider audience, did it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we had regional tracks that sprung up across the Midwest and the West, creating sort of a pipeline of drivers and teams. And one of those tracks, probably the leading track in the Southwest, was where?
Arlington Downs.
Okay, so these are cars, and these are front engine cars, right?
Yes.
Most of them single seat?
Most of them were single seat. There was a brief period in the 30s where they were dual seaters, but most of them are single seats.
Yeah. So, but you basically have a sport that's kind of on the cusp of transformation, don't you?
Absolutely.
So, I know you've got one famous driver who won a lot of those with this 47 to 50.
Yes. So Ted Horn is one of his winning pictures. He's hoisting the Wagner Cup in the exhibit. Is one of my favorite pictures in the collection, and one of the most prominent in the exhibit. And Ted Horn was the first person to win 3 consecutive AAA championship car championships. Period. So he kind of started that winning streak and that drive to want to win so many in a row. Unfortunately, in the 1947 season, he lost his life at the final race of the season, of the championship season. So he won the championship posthumously. But that season started in Arlington Downs, where he won, and we have the photograph of him winning that cup. And then in DuQuoin, Illinois, unfortunately, he lost his life in a race.
Racing is a dangerous thing. I think
Yes.
some other famous racers of that era, Bill Vukovich, Wilbur Shaw, and we mentioned already the subset of this particular thing, these midget things. And you said the sprint cars are the big one? So tell us about the actual exhibit yourself. I know it's a small exhibit, and if you don't know, if you've never been to special collections, it's not like a museum exactly. Exhibitions come and go. It's on the 6th floor of the library.
Yes, sir.
You take the elevator to the 6th floor, and then you walk out into the foyer. Most exhibits are right there where you first walk out, are
Yes,
they
sir.
not?
Yep.
Is that where this one is?
And that's exactly where
okay,
this
you
one's
open the
at.
elevator, you walk out.
It's right there
the-
to your left.
and turn to your left. Okay. So I know it's a small exhibit, and by the way, if you hadn't have found this probably would have disappeared from Arlington history forever because there just isn't that much. I went back and looked in some 1950s Citizen Journal clips and things about it, although it was the Citizen and the Journal back in those days, and they simply were not covering.
Well, and I found that quite often, and whenever I was looking at newspapers specifically, where it would just kind of be a snippet of like, oh, also there's a race going on. I was like, well, like I want to know more. What does that mean? There's a race going on.
They just they still were kind of into that football, baseball,
Exactly.
sort of mindset, and that I think that's probably why that you found so few pictures as well. The other is that those cameras of that era are typically those sort of gigantic graphic things you see in the old movies, some flash bulbs, and they tended not to have super shutter speeds and be very slow, so it's difficult to get moving.
Some action shots.
And
We
movement.
were lucky that we have, I think there's 3 action shots in the exhibit, but even those, you could tell it's some antiquated technology.
Yeah, I'm sure they're slightly fuzzy.
Yes, just a tad.
Some of that, just a tad. Plus, the years have not been kind to those old emulsions, have they?
No, and thankfully at UTA we have a huge, it's called our cold storage vault, and that's where all of our photo negatives are kept. And so it's essentially a giant walk-in freezer, and so we're doing our best to preserve them, but some of them are a little rough.
Okay. Well, I think the track might have picked up a little fame along the way because towards the end of the tenure there, it might have been the very last race, they had, well, I'll let you tell the story. Good old Clark Gable.
Yeah, so in 1950, Clark Gable and Barbara Stanwyck starred in a film called To Please a Lady, and the film centers around this grizzled war hero that Clark Gable is, and he is post-war, doesn't really know what to do, so he starts racing and is kind of a dangerous racer. Falls in love with Barbara Stanwyck along the way, and of course, and so he's kind of finding himself. You see this going off on a tangent here, but you see this kind of theme in films post World War II, where it's more kind of grizzled, coming to terms with reality, coming to terms with war, and so veterans trying to find themselves post war. And this film is no different, even though it's a little more of a kind of a romance, if you would.
I guess so, with the action. Some of the footage from the track is actually made into the movie, did it not?
Yes, sir. So any scene in the film where they're on a dirt track was filmed at Arlington Downs.
I looked up. I thought, well, hey, maybe it being Gable and Stanwyck that it won an Academy Award or something, and evidently it wasn't of the Academy Award winning.
I don't think so. I have yet to see it, but
winning genre. I
Yeah.
sent you, by the way. I found a couple of photos.
Yes, I got
that
those.
I sent,
Thank you.
That I sent to you, but now I have to send the podcast crew those same photos. Okay, so you end up with what? Maybe it's a small collection.
Yep, there's about 8 to 10 photographs in the collection, along with a signed program from To Please the Lady, so from that race, that 1950 race that they held to film for the movie, signed by Clark Gable. We also have an overhead map of the Downs track, and then those 2 programs that I mentioned earlier.
Interesting. Well, in case people out there don't know what happened to Arlington Downs, right around the racing itself stopped for this particular type of racing. What, 1957?
Yeah.
I think they had some other dirt track stuff and
There's stock
some-
car racing and things like
other
that.
stock car racing, other things there. But around 1957, an entrepreneur named Angus Wynn bought the entire old W2 wagon or place. I think it was around 6,000 acres plus a lot of other stuff, and he created from that Great Southwest Industrial District, and then very soon after that, they needed a little funding mechanism, so he created the first Six Flags over Texas. There's a historical marker.
Yes,
But
sir.
It's on. Is it Six Flags Road?
Yes.
Road to Six Flags, and then
Yeah.
Six Flags Road, which is right off of Division, and then another historical marker, I think, on Randall Mill.
Yes, sir.
That you can find out. Other than that, there's no hint in Arlington that this was ever part of the city's identity, even though at the time it was really kind of a, substitute for frontier adventure, I guess.
Absolutely. It's kind of outside of those 2 historical markers, kind of wiped off. And I did an overlay of where the old track would have been in comparison to the new track that we'll see this weekend. And they are less than half a mile away from each
Sure.
other.
If you could take a turn on that street, and that would have I think Six Flags Road, it would actually be on the western edge of the track, and
Yes.
then and 3 or 4 blocks to the left, you would be able to hear modern Indy racing at all.
Exactly.
So everything old comes around someday, doesn't
Absolutely.
it? Okay, the exhibit's on right now, right?
Yes, sir.
And I know you've extended a little bit. How long will it actually be up in special collections?
So the exhibit will be on view until March 30th, so through the end of March. And it's available right now, open and ready for people to come check out.
Price is right?
Free 99.
Showing up there. Okay. Okay. Listen, I appreciate your time for this. Of
course.
You need to catch out the special collections. Are there any particular type of collections up there that you want to brag about that are up there that would be great for people to have as a reference before we depart from this thing?
Oh, geez, there's so many great things to see up there. So much great Arlington history in specific. Our most popular Arlington collection is the Baraka Home Collection, which was a home in town for what they called erring and wayward girls. So that is a constantly pulled collection. People love to see that one. Really, we have a great Six Flags map, the very first Six Flags map that was put out of like the amusement park, which is fantastic. And we're just happy to pull whatever people want to see. We keep the archives for people to use them. So we encourage everybody to come check us out.
Be sure to subscribe and share this podcast for more stories, historical photos, and ways to get involved in Arlington's 150th anniversary. Visit arlington150.com and follow at City of Arlington on social media. Until then, let's keep honoring our past and pave the way for what's next. The story of Arlington is still being written, and you're part of it. So long.